We are all witnessing that the balance in the world is shifting day by day. Ukraine's struggle for independence continues to spread in waves. The occupation policies of the Russian army have moved to another dimension while seeking support. North Korea has expressed that it will support Russia, taking into account its own interests. Of course, the North Korean people did not take this very well. North Koreans who opposed the government did what they have done best for many years and fled to South Korea. The North Koreans who have already defected have made a big deal out of it. Let's take a look at this development that drove the North Korean leader crazy. Around 200 North Korean defectors living in South Korea, mostly with military backgrounds, want to be deployed to Ukraine to wage psychological warfare against Pyongyang troops reportedly deployed to Russia. The group of ex-soldiers with up to 10 years of military experience are ready to use their insider knowledge of North Korean military culture to disrupt and demoralize Kim Jong-un's troops. South Korea's Migration Administration says North Koreans fleeing repressive rule are eager to join the war in Ukraine. Ahn Chan-il, defector and president of the World Institute for North Korean Studies, commented when he saw this situation. "We are veterans who understand North Korea's military mentality better than anyone else." He said the group is ready to work as psychological operations operators, such as making loudspeaker broadcasts, preparing and distributing leaflets, and acting as interpreters. According to the report, the proposal reflects the anger shared by more than 30,000 northern defectors currently living in South Korea. The defectors were alarmed by Kim Jong-un's aggression and disregard for international law while sending troops to help Russia. The deserters expressed the following: "As former North Korean soldiers, we are ready to go to the front, wage psychological warfare, rescue these soldiers, and eliminate the North's mercenary policies." Capitalizing on their deep understanding of North Korea's military culture, the deserters believe they can exploit weaknesses and potentially encourage North Korean soldiers to turn their weapons. Ahn, who deserted in 1979 while serving as a frontline guard, inspired by South Korean loudspeaker broadcasts and leaflets, said the group could also convince captured North Korean soldiers to desert if they fall into Ukrainian hands. Most North Korean soldiers, including elite special forces, suffer from food shortages and malnutrition. The soldiers you see in televised parades are a carefully selected few. They are the alpha of the entire population. Lee Min-bok, another leading figure in the initiative, spoke directly to Ukraine and wrote an open letter to President Volodymyr Zelensky through the Ukrainian embassy in Seoul. North Korean soldiers are essentially there as mercenaries, but we will go voluntarily with a good faith mission. Our presence in Ukraine alone can significantly affect the morale of North Korean troops. Lee Min-bok expressed hope that the Ukrainian government would welcome their proposal. Let's take a look at why the fugitive North Koreans are so eager to help the Ukrainian territory. As we know, North Korea has a world-famous repressive system. A large part of the country is fed up with this oppressive system. Almost all of the soldiers who find the opportunity prefer to escape. The people, on the other hand, do not like the form of government, but they support the escaping soldiers inwardly because they cannot speak out too much. North Koreans fleeing such an oppressive environment have decided to do what they can to tip the scales when they see their country's support for Russia. Many North Korean defectors believe that they will do wonders on Ukrainian soil, replacing Ukrainian military recruits. And the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, of course, is outraged by this. The hardline leader, who is already successfully running a repressive system, is planning to take it out on his protégés by recruiting them into the Russian army. As we know, in the past few weeks, a lot of troops have been sent to the Russian army. This was not welcomed by South Korea, North Korea's declared enemy. North Korea's participation in the occupation of Ukrainian territory does not bode well. North Korea is, of course, helping Russia in its own interests. In a possible future war between the North and the South, Kim Jong-un wants Russia's support. Aware of this, South Korea has taken action to put a stop to all this. President Yoon Suk-yeol recently signaled that South Korea may reconsider its long-standing stance against providing lethal aid to conflict zones, depending on North Korea's involvement in the war. South Korea will not sit idly by if North Korean troops support Russia, he said, hinting that Seoul may consider arming Ukraine if military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow escalates. Military analyst Wi Seung-gun noted that South Korea may approach supplying arms to Ukraine, focusing on defense systems such as anti-aircraft missiles without excluding the supply of offensive weapons such as artillery ammunition. So far, South Korea's ammunition supplies to Ukraine have made a big difference on the front line. Seeing this, Russia has been on North Korea's heels. North Korea, which did not refuse Russia's demands, took a great risk and sent its soldiers to fight. Kirilo Budanov, chief of Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, HJSR, said that about 12,000 North Korean soldiers, including 500 officers and 3 generals, have been deployed in Russia. According to Kiev Post sources inside the HUR, North Korea is providing Russia with personnel, weapons, and equipment to help it recover from significant battlefield losses. In return, Russia has offered North Korea financial support and advanced technology to help develop and expand its nuclear program, Budanov said. As we can see, North Korea has begun to realize what it had dreamed of all along. Russia has offered North Korea weapons in exchange for troops, and the Ukrainian government has thwarted North Korea's nefarious plans. Ukraine's I Want to Live project released a new Korean-language video on October 23rd, calling on North Korean troops to surrender to Ukrainian forces. Launched by Ukraine's General Directorate of Intelligence in September 2022, the 24/7 I Want to Live hotline helps Russian soldiers voluntarily surrender themselves or their units to the Ukrainian military. The Russian military has been promised that after surrendering, they will be arrested in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. In a statement in Korean, you should not die senselessly in a foreign country. You must not repeat the fate of hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers who will never return home. No matter how many troops Pyongyang sends to help Russia, no matter the destination, Ukrainian POW camps are ready to receive soldiers of all nationalities, religions, and ideological views. The Ukrainian side guarantees the North Korean military safe detention conditions, food, and medical care, the statement said. John Foreman, CBE, Britain's former defense attaché in Moscow from 2019 to 2022, said Ukraine's efforts could help North Koreans defect. John Foreman continued, North Korean soldiers will also know that the treatment of the Ukrainians will be much more humane than the treatment of their own side and the Russians. Foreman hypothesized that North Korea, probably anticipating this, held the families of the soldiers hostage, only to reveal the consequences of desertion on their families. Kim Jong-Un has absolutely no remorse about killing his own people, starving them, killing his political rivals, anyone he deems disloyal. So I think that keeping that sword of Damocles over the heads of the families of North Korean soldiers would be a way to keep their loyalty. As we all know, Russia and North Korea signed a mutual defense pact during Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Pyongyang in June. As part of the agreement, the North Korean military announced that an engineering unit would join Russian forces in Donetsk Oblast the following month. It turned out that the secret clause allowed North Korea to send its first 1,000 soldiers to Ukraine to gain military experience. Ukraine's chance to put North Korean soldiers out of their misery further angered the North Korean leader. The number of deserters is already high enough, and if more join the project, North Korea's image will be damaged. There are several factors for North Korea to send its troops to this war. The most important of these is explained by Ukrainian political scientist Ruslan Bortnik. The participation of its armed forces in the attack on Ukraine will allow the North Koreans to gain experience in the most modern types of warfare, the use of drones and advanced missile systems, methods of cyber warfare, and tactical melee techniques. All this is invaluable information for the modernization of North Korea's military potential. The country seems focused on acquiring tactical and technical knowledge, but not on full-scale participation in the war of aggression. North Korea sees the war on the territory of Ukraine as a full-fledged preparatory program. On the other hand, many analysts hope that North Korea's involvement in the war will galvanize the West. Analysts say the following: allies need to structurally increase their support and invite Ukraine to join NATO. When it comes to actively defending freedom, Ukraine is more NATO than many allies who see membership only as a free pass for security. Nor do Ukrainians see any other way to rebuild except through the collective deterrence of Putin's forces. But we have yet to see this materialize. It would be the greatest tragedy for Ukraine if the free West it is trying to join turns out to no longer exist. Against this backdrop, with the conflict likely to continue, an important question will be how states like South Korea can increase their support for Ukraine to end the war faster or help Kiev better manage its economic and humanitarian impact. South Korea moved quickly to support efforts to impose sanctions on Moscow after the war began. While Seoul agreed to impose US and European Union export controls on strategic products, it also agreed to extend those export controls to Belarus over its support for Russia's invasion. Seoul also supported the exclusion of some Russian banks from the SWIFT international payment system, while private cryptocurrency exchanges also restricted IP addresses in Russia from accessing exchanges in South Korea. While not part of US or European sanctions on Russian energy exports, South Korea has significantly reduced its imports of Russian fossil fuels. Russian crude oil and refined petroleum products imports have fallen by more than 70% in volume terms, while LNG imports have dropped by 40% in the last 12 months. Only coal imports from Russia increased. Seoul also provided $3 million worth of generators to help Ukraine cope with power shortages this winter and joined a UNICEF program to help Ukrainian refugees. On the first anniversary of the Russian invasion, South Korea pledged an additional $130 million in aid to Ukraine. In addition to providing financial assistance to Ukraine, these funds are expected to support the restoration of Ukraine's power grid, demining, and ODA projects for reconstruction. In total, South Korea has committed to provide around $230 million to directly assist Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees. South Korea has also provided support in other ways. As Europe sought to increase its LNG supplies in preparation for winter, South Korea allowed some of its LNG purchases to be diverted to Europe. It also participated in the World Food Programme's Grain from Ukraine program, which buys Ukrainian grain for countries facing severe food shortages. However, South Korea has been reluctant to export arms directly to Ukraine. South Korean law prohibits exporting arms to countries involved in a conflict, but North Korea is an additional factor. The former Moon administration worried about deteriorating relations with Russia, which the Moon government saw as a potential partner in bringing North Korea back to talks on Pyongyang's nuclear program. For the current Moon administration, there are concerns about the potential for Russia to provide North Korea with modern aircraft or other technology. Pyongyang needs to advance its weapons programs in return for South Korea's military support for Ukraine. Instead of sending weapons directly to Ukraine, South Korea has taken a different approach. Seoul has approved the export of parts or weapons that contain South Korean components but are not fully Korean weapon systems. It has also sold ammunition to the United States for delivery to Ukraine and is reportedly in talks to sell additional ammunition to Washington. With Ukraine consuming more ammunition than US and European arms manufacturers can produce, European authorities are putting increasing pressure on South Korea to supply arms directly to Ukraine. In light of South Korea's restrictions on arms exports, there are 3 steps it can take to support the war effort in Ukraine. Seoul could conduct a high-level review of which weapon systems have South Korean components and provide prior authorization for transfers of those items. This would help ensure that weapon systems that are not entirely South Korean can be transferred to Ukraine if needed. South Korea could also consider replenishing other countries' stockpiles, similar to ammunition shipments to the United States. Finally, even if Seoul cannot provide lethal aid, it could take steps to ensure that South Korea takes a leading role in providing non-lethal aid, such as bulletproof vests, night vision goggles, and other items Ukraine needs to sustain its war effort. South Korea's concerns about Russia's ability to transfer precision weapons technology should be taken seriously, but should also be balanced against the deeper geopolitical changes wrought by the war. The relationship between North Korea and Russia is already deepening. North Korea is reportedly supplying weapons to Russia's Wagner Group, and Russia no longer reports trade data, which means Moscow will no longer enforce UN sanctions against North Korea. Russia is probably still holding back on sending certain sensitive items, but these blockades may be weakening regardless of how the war is resolved. There are other steps South Korea could take to support Ukraine. One step that could be critical to the war effort is increased vigilance in export controls. There are suspicions that Russia is using imports from third countries such as Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China, and Belarus to avoid sanctions. For example, exports of processors and control chips to Turkey increased by almost 1,500% in 2022. There may be a plausible explanation for this. The level of Turkish semiconductor imports from South Korea is at the same level as pre-pandemic imports and may simply reflect trade normalization. However, trade with Kazakhstan may warrant a deeper examination. Not only have exports of processors and control chips to Kazakhstan increased significantly over the past 2 years, but they have risen far beyond anything seen in the past decade. Ensuring that critical components are not smuggled to Russia through third countries is another important step South Korea can take. While South Korea has recently pledged to increase its assistance to Ukraine, only India and China have provided less as a percentage of GDP, according to the Kiel Institute's Ukraine Support Tracker. In addition, only India and China have provided less support for uncontested assistance to Ukrainian refugees. While the tracker has not been updated for South Korea's latest pledge, it will not change these figures significantly and suggests that there is additional scope for South Korea's humanitarian support. Finally, South Korea could consider engaging more deeply in the post-war reconstruction process. Estimates for rebuilding Ukraine's physical infrastructure after the war range from $138 billion to $750 billion. Although South Korea's most recent pledge of support includes the possibility of ODA for reconstruction, it could promise to work more closely with the EU to develop a post-war recovery plan and provide support through a coordinated process. South Korea could also offer to start negotiations on a free trade agreement to help boost Ukrainian exports after the war. As the world's 10th largest economy and a major arms producer, there is room for South Korea to play a bigger role in helping Ukraine. It could do so by streamlining any military assistance it can legally provide, suppressing efforts to smuggle sanctioned products to Russia, and increasing humanitarian and reconstruction aid. In the long run, it may also be in Seoul's interest